what I want to do is talk about something. I want to talk about your yard. And in your yard, you end up with three things: the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I don't have Clint Eastwood, and I don't even have any music. But I wished I did. That would add something. The good guys, as you can imagine, are our primary pollinators. We literally can't live without them. A large part of them are a native bee. We know we've had honeybees, but our native bees now, with the collapse of the honeybees, our native bees are becoming really the most important part of our pollinators in our yard. There's several things that do pollination. We know about bees, but bats are big pollinators in some countries, and even wind pollination. That's also, I think we got it, guys. Okay, pollen is really important because this is how you transfer the sex. You didn't know I was going to talk dirty, but this is how it is. You transfer, the male transfers the sperm or the male cell into the female, and pollination occurs. Do you know pollen has vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, sugars, and fats? And you ought to know that because this is what the bees take back to their nest to feed their little babies. All of these things are important, so this is what they take back. Pollination affects the whole ecosystem. We know about insects and birds, but I bet you didn't know that bears, 80 to 90% of the food the bears have come from insects. Fruit, nuts, bulbs, and roots. You always think about a bear eating somebody or eating another animal, but a large 80 to 90% of their food comes from pollination. Rachel Winfrey writes for the National Wildlife Federation magazine, and she does such great articles. If you don't take that magazine, you need to. It's wonderful. But she calls bees the gorilla in the pollination world. But all these other things are important pollinators as well. We know about colonial bees, which are our honeybees. There are just hundreds of thousands of bees working together in harmony, a lot like our Senate and House of Representatives. It's a superorganism, except they're more successful than our representatives. A bumblebee's nest, I have been fascinated with bumblebees. I didn't know a lot about bumblebees, but bumblebees are ground nesters. They'll find a little hidey hole. That looks like a vole hole. Does everybody know what a vole is? A vole, not a mole, or not a vole. But they make a little bitty hole like this, and this is where the vole has its den. So many times these bumblebees, the queen bee, there may be 5 queen bees that are left after the season, and these 5 queen bees will leave and go find a hidey hole for the winter. 5 impregnated females will leave and go find a hole for the winter, and they won't come back till spring. Everything else dies. Everything else in that colony dies but those females. Now, I'm probably going to embarrass some men here. How many men of you have found a yellow jacket's nest and said, let's throw some gasoline in there and burn it? Okay, that's the thing not to do. They're all going to die anyway. If you find a yellow jacket's nest or a ground nesting bee colony you don't want, all you have to do is put black plastic on it and put some stones, and they'll cook like fritters. The heat, they don't have a back door. They will completely cook in the ground, but all of them will die when winter comes. So do not throw gasoline or any kind of chemicals in there and try to burn them out and blow yourself up. But in the spring, she comes out and she will make her colony. There are 130 species of bumblebees, and they're really our most important pollinators since the honeybees are declining. And you can see right here, this is before and after. She's gone in that, she or he or whatever has gone into that flower. Look at the difference. Now look at the difference. Look at what a wimp that honeybee is. Wimp, wimp, wimp. Look at those little things on his leg. And that bumblebee is absolutely loaded. And the reason he does that is he does buzz pollination. He gets in there and he just buzzes and he shakes his whole booty and everything. And he gets completely encoded with this pollen. So this is why these guys are one of our most important pollinators. They're, sadly to say, the populations are declining. Probably about 1/5 are already gone. They're extinct, no more, gone. But they're pretty phenomenal bees. It is important that we study these because 70% of everything that we eat is pollinated. Everything, 1/3 of everything you eat as far as food consumption is pollinated. This industry alone contributes $3 billion to the economy of farms. If we did not have pollination, we would have brown bread, black tea, no fruits, no veggies, no milk, and no meat. So that's how serious these primary pollinators are, because we are slowly but surely digging ourselves a grave. There's very little known about this. They capture these things. There's several areas that they capture, and they study these. Unfortunately, when they capture them, they have to kill them to look and to identify them. So this is what we're doing right now. We have several of these across the United States where people are trying to study to figure out just what is going on. We know about honeybees. Honeybees have gone down the tube because of colony collapse. This is dated. This was from 1945 to 2005, and it's even worse now. 95% of Great Britain, 95% of the colonies of Great Britain were lost during this time frame, 95%. So they began studies. Oddly enough, Australia has had no problem with colony collapse. So whatever Australia is doing, we need to do. Okay, mites are a big issue too, because mites will come in on a low-life bee and bring it into a hive, and once that little honeybee gets in with the mite, it will continue to suck on that honeybee until it dies, but in the process, it creates other bees. It hatches out other little varroa mites. And these other varroa mites get on the other members of the colony, and this is what's causing collapse. Usually, it will increase 12 times in 12 weeks, and in a mere matter of a year or two, all of your colonies can be gone. And that's the little mite. I have one question. Do we have any beekeepers here? I have a question I love to ask beekeepers, and that is, you know, when you look in a honeybee colony, you have a guard bee. That guard bee stands up front, and he's supposed to throw all the ne'er-do-well bees out. You know, he's sort of like a bouncer in a bar. You know, if you don't dress right or you get ugly, he throws you out. Well, that's what the guard bees do in the honeybees. And I've often wondered why the honeybee guard cannot perceive another bee with a mite on it. And I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. But they need to get better guard bees, in my opinion. This is exactly what happens when you hear of a varroa mite. This is it. This is a pupa. And see those little black things on the brown things? That's the mite. And right on the left-hand side, that's what a mite looks like. And if you'll look at the mite on the bee, you can see part of that wing is deformed. So wherever it sits there and starts sucking, it sucks the juices out and it will deform. And it just depends on what part of the bee that it gets on. But these things will actually multiply in the colony on other bees, and it spreads throughout this colony. And if one of those bees goes into another colony, the same thing happens. So the mites have really put the whammy on our bee colonies. That and the pollination issue, and the fact that we're just getting too many chemicals out there probably. Bumblebees are colony nesters, but a bumblebee can get a varroa mite on it and it will damage that bee, but they do not reproduce on bumblebees. So what is the secret that the bumblebee has that prevents the reproduction of mites? The honeybees could learn from that. But the big problem we think are chemicals, and there's a whole lot of chemicals. When this colony collapse happened in Great Britain, they did a study. They established a bee colony and put it in an area, and they let it do its thing. It went back and forth and started gathering honey and pollen and started the nest, and everything was going cool. And then they sprayed it with neonicotinoids, or the neonics. And this, just in a matter of weeks, it began to lose its way home. It got confused. just like somebody in downtown Murfreesboro can get lost with all this traffic. But they begin to get confused. So right then, they begin to condemn the neonicotinoids, and rightfully so, because they've reproduced this again. We don't really know what's going on. About this time, California did the same kind of study, except this time they sprayed fungicides. They sprayed the colony with fungicides. And the fungicides did the same thing to the honeybees that the neonicotinoids are. So there's probably a lot of things out there affecting them that we just don't know. We don't have the answer yet. But this neonicotinoid is a nerve poison. I think most everybody has heard of these, have you not, if you're a gardener? It's a great idea. I mean, it is just marvelous because it's a pelletized chemical you put in the ground. It comes up through the plant and is expressed in the bloom and the fruit. So that if any bug gets on that bloom, it kills the bug. Now that's a great idea when you think about orchards. Orchards are sprayed till cows comes home. I mean, there's one point where every month or every week you have to spray those trees to get your fruit. So as this spraying continues, you're exposing a lot of other things. So it's a bad thing to do, but it's what you have to do to have peaches and apples and plums and everything like that. But that's a lot of chemicals. But if you could come up with a chemical that would not harm the primary pollinators, that would be great. I mean, it would stay in the ground, slowly come up through the plant. You wouldn't have to go out and disperse it. You wouldn't have to do all that spraying and everything. The only problem is it does kill our primary pollinators. Anything you spray for any kind of bugs, ticks, insects, whatever, will kill the primary pollinator because they are insects. And there's the studies. This is a carpenter bee, and he's a primary pollinator, but he sort of cheats. If he comes to a tubercle flower, he will go in and go to the bottom of the tube of that and suck all the nectar out. He doesn't go in here and pollinate. He goes in here, so he doesn't pollinate. So he's getting his stuff free. Now they'll do damage on your house. Y'all know about that. Do you know the difference between a carpenter bee and a bumblebee? The carpenter bee has a shiny butt. The bumblebee has a furry butt. And you can see this. If you will, the carpenter bee looks like he's had polyurethane on that abdomen area. I have a coreopsis in front of the house, and I can take that coreopsis bloom and move it around and let the light hit it. First you gotta have your glasses on. But anyway, you can move it around and you can actually see if that is glossy or if it's furry. And if it's furry, it's a bumblebee. And that's why it makes them such great pollinators, because they get in there and all that pollen sticks to their abdomen and the fur there. This is a carpenter bee's nest. And it's just like every other native bee. She digs a hole or finds a hole, and she will make a hole in that wood structure or tree or whatever it is. It has to be a woody substance. And she will lay an egg. If you'll look to the, I guess to your right, there's an egg in there and a dab of mud. I think food, mud, and baby. Food, baby, and mud. Food, egg, mud. So the egg hatches and will start to eat the food. The food is a loaf of bread. It's got nectar and pollen. That's what the babies are eating. And so all these little babies, every one of those, in fact, you can see how some of them have already come out. You can only just see the mud there. But these have already left and they've flown out. This is how all native bees nest. This is what people that used to have orchard bees in their orchards, they put up these structures and the bees can go in there. We'll see some of those later. Now, the bad thing about this is if this is on the side of your house, that's not good. And it's even worse when the downy woodpecker finds it, because he knocks a big hole about this big, because he knows there's food there. I get calls from people saying, I got a woodpecker tearing my house up, can I shoot it? No, you can't. It's protected. You can spray the house with some kind of chemicals if you want to, but here again, it has to be redone periodically, so it's a constant battle to keep spraying stuff. So they are a nuisance, but they are primary pollinators. Here, this is a very good example. This is what your wood looks like, and I'm sure all of you've seen that. And that's because the little downy woodpecker is trying to get in there. If it's a nice little round hole, the bee's done that, but if it's wobbled out like that, that's where that downy woodpecker or the hairy woodpecker, either one, will get in there and try to dig those little larvae out. The bee trap on the right-hand side is good. Do y'all have those? They work. If you haven't, you need to get one because they do work. I was really surprised myself. And all it's doing, the hole in that thing goes up this way. And when the bee comes in, it falls down like this. And it's so heavy it can't fly up. And what it's looking for is a hole. If you watch them, they'll go on every part of your porch looking for a hole. They'll stop at a knot and look at it. But they're looking for a hole. So when you put this thing up, you've created a hole. And when he does go in there, he can't come out, or she. And it is a good way of getting rid of them. You can buy them just about anywhere, and you can make them for that matter. All you need is a fruit jar, and the angle needs to go up about 45 degrees. That's all it takes. These are other solitary bees. These are the other native bees that I'm telling you about. This is a polyester bee. It lays an egg and it exudes something that looks like plastic. And that plastic encloses the little egg-like thing. It looks just like polyester. But they're outstanding pollinators, and what you can do, what you're looking at down here, is a polyester bee coming out of a nest. Now what that is a bunch of bamboo. This person is just taking a wad of bamboo, different sizes, because all these bees are different sizes, and wrapped them around there, and these little bees, when they find it, they'll nest there. There's a bumblebee bee, a blueberry bee. This thing will visit 5,000 plants in a year. They all die in a year, 5,000 plants. It said, the source I read said it would produce 6,000 blueberries. But it looks almost like a bumblebee, very much like so. There's a thing called a mining bee. This little thing makes hole in the ground and lays her eggs and stuff. But look how fuzzy her bud is. And see how much pollen she's collecting? It looks like a wasp. It's not a wasp, it is a mining bee. And that's what their little nest looks like. Each one of those little circles is food and a baby or an egg. And about the time your plants need to be pollinated, these things come out of the ground. Isn't that interesting? This is a leafcutter bee. Look at that little, looks like a cigar. She creates that. She creates this cigar-type structure in the ground and lays her eggs. She does the food, mud, or I think it's food, baby, mud, food, baby, mud. This is a leafcutter bee, and they use just soft stems. So this is important to remember when you are cutting the weeds and stuff out of your yard. If you've got a bramble stem, not a tree, woody stem, but a bramble stem, we all know what that is. They're easy, you can break those off, you can cut them real easy. And if you'll throw those over in the woods, just make a wood pile, you will be producing a house for these, because she will drill a hole in that, and that's where she lays her eggs. It's a leafcutter bee. Squash bee. How many people here grow yellow squash? Nobody? That's good, because every time I ask that, somebody raises their hand, and I always ask, why do you grow it? And they said, it's good. And I said, it's tasteless. And they say, well, you put butter and sugar on it, or butter and salt. And I say, you can put enough butter and salt on cardboard. It's still tasteless. But nevertheless, if you are a yellow squash fan, this is the little guy that does it. We're doing studies on these, and researchers have found that there's 770 native bees in the United States, and they have found about 95% of them in the last 2 decades. They don't say how many of them they found, so they're still there. Here you're looking at a squash bee, the top one, that beautiful yellow one, for your cucumbers, and that's a mason bee that people use for their orchards right underneath there. How can you help? You know this, most of you are gardeners. Provide pollen and nectar. The big secret here is provide flowers from spring to fall. Fall is okay, but spring's a booger bear. There's just almost nothing growing in the early spring. I heard Rita Venable talk about getting rid of vinca because it is an exotic weed. And I planned on doing that, and I went out one spring and there was the bumblebees were out, and I looked and there wasn't a thing blooming in my yard but vinca. And I thought, I can't get rid of those. There's not another thing in this yard blooming for these things to eat. So if you'll get your book out and cipher on it a little bit, you'll find some early bloomers. Stay with native plants, provide water and mud, and then this is something you won't hear anywhere. Get you a bare spot and till it up and wet it down every now and then. And that's what your native bees will come to get that little plug to go in their nest. So just stick you a place off there and let that mud, that good Tennessee mud, red clay, and just leave a bare area there and then water it once in a while. I thought about doing that. I thought about I got a lot of mud, and I thought about hanging a gallon jug up, you know, with a little water in it and letting it drop. And I thought that'd be perfect. You just fill that gallon jug up every now and then, and you keep dropping. And then I thought, yeah, and the first thing I'm going to do is see a raccoon out there underneath there, or a deer, trying to pull it down and drink it. What's happened today is with our agricultural area, we have made mega fields, huge fields, and they're not being pollinated. They're not being pollinated because there's not any bees. So one of the things that have been proposed is to cut these mega fields into smaller areas and put a natural boundary around it, just a row of native plants, just native trees, native shrubs. And there you're going to have food for your bees and your butterflies, and you're going to provide pollination for this. The farmer will say, but it'll cut down my yield. But you know, how good is your yield anyway? Global warming is an issue, and it's changing the amount of nectar and the time that the nectar gets here. So I think we're probably going to need more early spring plants. I think that would maybe help more than anything, because we have plenty of the fall. Diversify your yard. You know this. Plant plants from spring to fall. Create a messy garden. Add some brush piles and leave some leaves and bare stuff. Don't make it too clean. This is a bumblebee nesting structure. You can find this stuff on bumblebee.org. You'll find more interesting stuff about bumblebees. But the stuff in the bottom is chicken wire, and there's a nest on top of that. You can use some kind of nesting straw, nesting material. I just used a bluebird nest. And then you leave a hole up there. And what he's done is he's put a little lid on this. He's put 2 stones and a shingle and a rock on there. And the theory is the bumblebees will go down there instead of a rodent hole, and that wire, she will make her little honey pots in her nesting structure on that wire surface. And I've done this. I put several out, and I've not had any success with it. But I've got a lot of rodent holes. But it's been unsuccessful, except the raccoons had a great time pulling the nesting material out. They just went there every day and pulled nesting material out. They're like toddlers. They can't stand it. They've got to hold something, shake something, try to break something, just like toddlers. Okay, here's some bee houses. This mason house is just holes dug in there, and you see where they're actually plugging the holes. And here again, you can do bamboo that way too. If you will go online here, they will give you directions and everything. You can even buy these nesting tubes online, or you can just use straws. But she'll go in there and put food, her little loaf of bread, and that baby, and a chunk of mud. Okay, or you can build one of these. This is a native bee condo. And all this is construction plants, and you use native plants around there, and then you put punky wood that's rotten. And you might even take your drill and drill some holes in that wood. And put different sizes holes, because these bees are different sizes. Now, if you live in a swanky area in Brentwood, I don't know how to put this out, but if you live like me close to the woods, I think that would be a good thing to do. The bad part of your yard is ticks, and they are really bad. you're looking at the picture on the right hand or the left hand side is Lyme's disease. And the tick on the other side is the one that may give you Lyme's disease. You've seen this, I passed this around. Terry Hopkins used to work for us, and we were trapping, and he went out to take a whiz, and when he came back, he had come through a whole bunch of, these are nymphs, these are sea ticks. This is right after she lays the eggs. Every one of those things came out of one egg mass. Yes, ooh. Everybody started scratching, even the guy in the back scratching. But this is what you get on your clothes. And they reproduce, they make 3 metamorphoses. And each time they metamorphose, they fall off of their host and they look for another host. And they'll get another blood meal and fall off, and they look for another meal, and then it's an adult. And the adult, when it's old enough, will lay eggs. So they're insects, there are 3 different kinds, different forms of them. Now what you got on the left-hand side is a dog. I tried to find a deer. I had a deer in my yard, in my Coreopsis plant, and she was covered with ticks from here and on up to the top of her ear, just absolutely loaded. And I have seen in the woods when I'm doing trapping or something, about this high, you'll see a tree and they'll just be painted red with blood. And that's where the deer are trying to scratch these off. They get in there and scratch against a tree, trying to get these things off. So this is why when you read about ticks, they tell you that deer are the main contributor to the spread of ticks. I had a hard time believing that because I've got raccoons, possums, groundhogs, chipmunks, squirrels, skunks, you name it, I've got it. They're all mammals, they all carry ticks. And it's like, why does a deer? The main reason is there's deer everywhere. If we went out and looked, we'd find a deer in the neighborhood here. They're in downtown Nashville. You can hunt deer in downtown Clarksville. There's a certain area you can hunt deer in Clarksville. So this is why the deer are spreading these things. It's just they go everywhere. And every time she shakes her head or lays down and scratches, she's depositing these. If you can get a different tick, and each tick has a different disease. Now Lyme's disease and ehrlichiosis is a bacteria. And the amyplasmosis is a bacteria. The the Rocky Mountain spotted fever is a rickettsial. And this babelosis has a protozoan. A protozoan. I mean, how in the world does it get a protozoan in there? I read an article, I did not bring it with me today, the National Wildlife Federation or National Wildlife Magazine had a story about this couple that retired. And they moved to New York and they built this huge primary pollinator garden. And this guy immediately came down with 3 different tick diseases. He had Rocky Mountain spotted fever, ehrlichiosis, and babelosis. He tested positive for 3 different tick diseases. Now, did this guy get bit by 1 tick with 3 diseases? If so, he needs to buy a lottery ticket because he's pretty lucky if he can just get 3 diseases from 1 tick. But actually they can do that. Each tick can carry an organism or they can carry multiple organisms. I just found out about that. So I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just telling you take ticks bites seriously. This is Lyme's disease. Sometimes you'll get these little circles. It looks like a target of some kind. Sometimes you don't get them. The other part that I want to talk about is skin cancer. It's epidemic right now. It's epidemic, and you can take the 5 major cancers, which are 4 maybe, breast, lungs, colon, and prostate. Those are the 4 leading cancers in the United States. If you double all of those, there's more skin cancer than all of that. So it's getting hotter. You need to wear sunscreen. You need to wear a hat. You need to wear long sleeves if you're out there.